I'm gonna predict that you like this video and that you comment under this video. And one of those comments will be something on the lines of, who's the older sibling between you and Taylor? Come on. It's pretty obvious, isn't it? I'm 147 years older than him. Speaking of, it's his birthday today. Happy birthday, Taylor. We love Taylor. I met him way back in 94. Here's the top 10 strange predictions in history that came true. Number 10, iPads. If you've seen Stanley Kubrick's film 2001: A Space Odyssey, then you're familiar with him literally calling like 9 things about the future in that movie way back then. One of which he describes these handheld devices that astronauts use for communication. And the other is that monolith that appeared like 3 days after the lockdown. Do you remember that? Like, where did it go? As author Arthur C. Clarke described in a 1968 novel of the same name, these iPad-like devices were called newspads. iPad, newspad, and could be plugged into the ship's information circuit, which would scan the latest reports from Earth up to wherever they were in orbit. I think we're heading that way. A tiny little rectangle would expand until it filled an entire screen. Then when an astronaut was done, he could flash back to the complete page and select a new subject. Kind of sounds like opening up a new app or tab and switching back and forth. And no? Who knows, maybe Kubrick knew some of these early stages of tech way back then and had a head start. Unfortunately, neither Kubrick nor Clarke lived to see the iPad in 2010, but I'm sure they would have loved it. Tiny birds? Addicting. Number 9, cell phones. If you think I'm gonna talk about the picture of the lady walking with a cell phone on the internet that everyone thinks is a time travel from 1910, no, I'm not, because I'm not that gullible, first off. I believe in aliens, but not that stuff. Lady was just blowing her nose or something. Come on. They might have had a tad similar thing way before then and way before the 90s too, when those cell phones with the huge antennas were popping. Remember those? Yeah, apparently Nikola Tesla had a little crack at the old whippersnapper telephonogram in his day. The engineer and inventor briefly worked with Thomas Edison and suggested in 1909 that someday people will be very well walking around with phones in their pockets. Not wrong. He explained to the New York Times, quote, "It will soon be possible to transmit wireless messages all over the world so simply that any individual can carry and operate his own apparatus." Dude, you think he mastered Wi-Fi before it was actually a thing? Like, was that a Tesla coil? Wi-Fi? Guy was literally giving us free Wi-Fi and electric cars back then? He was ahead of his time, I'll tell you that for free. Number 8, streaming. 1987, what a time, huh? I wasn't around, but Whitney Houston was, and I Want to Dance with Somebody Else was the #1 on the charts. And, of course, this magazine interview between Omni and popular movie critic Roger Ebert. Of course, Kyle, how could we forget? The interviewer asked him to predict the future of cinema, and of course, the only one more narcissistic than an actor is a movie critic. Come on. So he took the opportunity to take an old swing at what he thought and said, quote, "We will have high-definition, widescreen TV sets and push-a-button dialing system to order the movie you want, at any time you want. You won't have to go to the video store, but instead order a movie on demand and then just pay for it. Video cassette tapes as we know them now will be obsolete both for showing pre-recorded movies and for recording movies." Yeah, buddy, you nailed it. Sorry to tell you, but yeah, Blockbuster disappears. It's very sad. If I'd have known that, I would have worked at one, you know what I mean? Been a video guy, you know? Hey man, Roger was smart, and the guy knew his craft. He was very right. He should have invested in Netflix. Number 7, headphones. When I was in high school way back then, I had to read this book called Fahrenheit 541. It was a great book. Loved the dystopian novel vibes. Ray Bradbury's 1953 futuristic masterpiece got a couple of things right. TVs mounted into walls literally everywhere, blasting censored, highly psychological news in an order to control and manipulate. And of course, some banger earbuds. That's right. In the society of Bradbury's book, the general public is obsessed with entertainment and needs to be constantly distracted by the media. Sounds like that's like right now, doesn't it? Society does so with these little seashell type things that they fit inside their ears, filling it with an electronic ocean sound of music and talk. Kind of sounds like us when Adele's 30 album came out, no? Just headphones for days. This guy, yeah, he nailed it. Seashells in your ears? I'm surprised the newest Apple earbuds aren't called seashells. Mind you, in the book, there's a bit more control and order and not just banger albums at your fingertips. I'm one of those people that listens to my headphones way too much. Way too loud too. My ears are literally a subwoofer by this point. Number 6, Mars's moons. More than 100 years before we learned that Mars has 2 moons, Phobos and Deimos, author Jonathan Swift made a very accurate ballpark guess about the red planet. In his 1726 novel, Gulliver's Travels, he wrote about 2 lesser stars, or satellites, which revolve around Mars. Even weirder, he predicted their exact size and speeds of rotation. I think that's a little hard since it's the mid-1700s, dude, and telescopes aren't even that good yet. No technology existed that would have made Mars any more visible than a tiny red dot. How could he have possibly known Mars has a moon, let alone 2? They didn't discover Mars's moons until like the 1800s, so how would he have known that, let alone written, let alone explain them in such detail? Guy is definitely an alien or knows some shit. Come on. He was talking about flying cities, magicians talking about the ancients, and conspiracies and humanoid races. Yeah, guy was abducted, that's all I'm saying. I'll say it. Number 5, the Titanic. Apparently back in the late 1800s, author by the name of Morgan Robertson wrote a tragedy at sea story about a giant boat that was supposed to be, quote, unsinkable. He coined the name the Futility, or the Wreck of the Titan. Yeah, cool disaster story, bro, but the Titanic doesn't sink for like another 14 years exactly. Before the ill-fated Titanic hit that infamous iceberg en route to New York City in the icy Atlantic, this guy was thinking up this shit. The similarities are creepy alone, right down to the name. Apparently he wasn't a psychic, but just a struggling storyteller while being an experienced seaman himself. Apparently he was just thinking ahead and was pondering the idea that maybe one of these huge cruisers could actually hit one of these things any day now. The book's name, The Wreck of the Titan, apparently was changed from The Futility, which is what it was titled, so something more like the Titanic sounding, maybe for better sales, I'm guessing. I don't know, both seem plausible to me. It was just a matter of time, really, I guess. But this guy, he should have had his characters float on bigger doors, no? Number 4, credit cards. It's always the eccentric people who think up the most brilliant stuff, don't they? The idea of something so business-oriented, thought up by a sci-fi dreamer. Credit cards were apparently predicted way before its first tap or interest rate. The concept was first introduced in Edward Bellamy's 1888 novel Looking Backward, as one character falls asleep in 1887 and wakes up in the year 2000. Y2K! Y2K! Never mind. No, that never happened. Only to find the society has become a socialist paradise. Full of new ideas, he explains that each person is given a physical punch card, which he procures at public storehouses found in literally every community. Whatever he desires, whenever he desires it. This arrangement, you see, totally obviates the necessity for business transactions of any sort between individuals and consumers. The concept was so well described that Bellamy even predicted the card making life easy, being able to effortlessly exchange between currencies without even walking into a bank. It wasn't until 1950 when the Diners Club card was even invented, which the credit card is based off of. Dude, these sci-fi writers were nailing what the future looked like back then. Who's giving them all these ideas? Number 3, The Simpsons. Ugh, where do I even begin with these predictions? We know The Simpsons, one of the greatest comedy cartoon shows ever created. Also, weirdly accurate on reflecting life years before it happens. The Simpsons first premiered in 1989, and it's the longest running American scripted sitcom ever. During their 32 years of TV, the show has predicted some amazingly accurate events. It's almost scary when you read all of their predictions because there's a lot. They like drew these things out in detail. Comedically enough, they're all like funny predictions too. Like Siegfried and Roy's tiger turning on them, like that's kind of a no-brainer. But like the cell phone autocorrect, smartwatches, Zoom meetings, but then it gets weird, like Homer figuring out physics equations 20 years before the actual mathematicians do. Government scandals resulting in millions of dollars, like who's writing this show? I hope in like 50 years aliens were like, yeah, we're from planet Marge. We just thought we'd help you out and give you a little comedy. That would be sick for you. Number 2, the moon landing. This one's hard because everyone who's ever looked up at the skies, doesn't matter the time era, we've all thought, I wonder how you get up there. What's all that floating around up there? Pretty human to ponder that, right? But From Earth to the Moon, an 1865 novel by famous author Jules Verne, got literally so close to minute details that just thinking rocket ships. Quote, a giant cannon fired a manned projectile into space. Verne then predicted that there would be 3 astronauts that would make it first to the moon. Okay, 3's a very specific number there, Vern. And then he goes on spitballs Florida as the perfect launching area for a mission to the moon. As in Kennedy Space Center. As in Cape Canaveral. Like, the guy didn't predict it, he wrote a blueprint for it. Apparently in his book he conjured up some sort of space gun that would shoot 3 men in a capsule named the Columbiad. Like, really, dude? The Columbiad? The Columbia? He even got some of the science right as to how to land on the moon and how to get back to Earth. Like, the dude is trolling us, right? He's definitely a time traveler. Like, is he an alien? And number 1, the greenhouse effect. Definitely the most important prediction on our list, and imminent to say the least. Had we known this prediction would come true, we could always send a Terminator back in time, John Connor style, and help out a little bit more, no? That's just me, I don't know. The hot seat is actually being taken up by the same guy who invented the telephone. That's right, Alexander Graham Bell, yeah, him. He apparently made a surprisingly accurate warning in a 1917 paper. He wrote, "Unchecked burning of fossil fuels and their greenhouse effect as a result." Quote, "a sort of hothouse effect to the Earth." That was published in the National Geographic in 1917. He wanted to explore energy conservation methods such as solar heating or even alcohol to burn gases for energy. He thought to collect solar power from sunlight and use it as energy source was the future. Dude, I can hear the men in the room laughing out loud right now. Like what must have that sounded like? Such a ridiculous idea for back then, right? Like, ha, the sun for energy. This guy invents the telephone, he thinks the sun gives the energy. This guy's an idiot. Hey, we hope you enjoyed that video. I've been your host, Kyle McWaters, and we'll see you next time on Bumblebee.